Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video is part of a larger video hop, the Save the Crafty YouTuber hop, and today I'm going to be sharing a lot of different ways on how to do a see-through stained glass technique on your card fronts. So my first card, I'll be using this die. This is from Cat Scrappiness, and it is a full A2 size background die. This makes this technique super easy. That's why I'm using this first, but I am going to show you how to use smaller dies later on in this video, so be sure to stick around for all those. To start this technique, I'm going to do some die cutting. I am using that butterfly background die to cut several pieces of white cardstock. For this card design, I'm going to be cutting this die 4 times, and that is because I need it to be a card front as well. So I'll take one extra die cut from this and make a card front, which I'll show you later on. Also, whenever you are die cutting for this technique, you need to use a heavyweight cardstock. I'm using a heavyweight 110-pound white cardstock. You need something with that thickness that's going to build up really nicely. You're also going to need something that will withstand a little bit of wet medium on top of it and will dry relatively flat. You don't want a ton of warping. Now, once I have this die cut, I'm just going to discard all those extra little butterflies. I want those see-through spaces for my card. So once I have everything ready to go, I'll go ahead and show you what I have. I have my 4 dies that my 4 die cut pieces that I die cut from my heavyweight white cardstock. I have a piece of clear acetate that's slightly smaller than my card front, but you want to make sure that it goes over all those openings. You need some sort of backing on it. And I also have my card base. This is an A2 side folding heavyweight white cardstock base. I made this one myself, and as you can see, these fit directly over the top of the A2 size card base. So in order to be able to see through, I'm going to need to cut up this card base and attach the die and make that my card front. So I'll take my card base, put it in my paper trimmer, line up my scored mark at about 1/4 of an inch, and this just chop away the rest of the card front. You don't need it. You just need that little bitty bit to attach your other piece to make your folding mechanism on your card. Because it's such a small little bit, you want to make sure you use a nice strong adhesive. I'm using 1/8 of an inch adhesive from scrapbook.com. This is really sticky stuff, and it works perfectly for this. And because it's 1/8 of an inch, I don't have to worry about any of it showing through. I put that on the inside of the fold, so that way nothing is going to show through on the inside of the card. It looks like a complete card front. You're going to cover up the front of this anyway, so you might as well just take an extra step out of it, put that on the inside, and fold it over on top of the butterfly card front. And there you've got your card base ready to go. Now that would make a really fun card, but we're going to go ahead and continue on with this technique. Next, you want to add on your acetate. This is your next layer. You need something to cover up those openings, but still allow it to be see-through. I'm using acetate. I wanted it to be completely see-through for this technique, but if you wanted a little bit more of a frosted look, you could always go for some vellum as well. That would be really pretty for this technique. You're just not going to get as see-through of openings. So I added a little bit more of that scrapbook.com adhesive, that 1/8 of an inch, just around the openings. You don't have to be too generous here. You just want to make sure that your acetate is going to stay in place. But you're going to have a few more layers on top of this, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. And I know I'm talking about a lot of layers, but even though these end up being thicker card fronts, they're not so thick you can't send them through the mail. Now, once I have that layer on, it's time to build up my next layer. So my next layer, I'm going to take 2 of those butterfly panels that I cut, and I'm going to layer them up just like I do whenever I'm making my chipboard elements with die cuts. That's exactly what you're doing here. I bought some chipboard, tried to die cut it. It didn't work out very well. It doesn't want to stick very well to the cardstock, so I find this much easier to do. Once I had 2 of those built up, I went ahead and applied some liquid adhesive on the back. I'm using liquid adhesive at this point, so I have that little bit of wiggle room and I can move this around. You want all the openings to line up really, really well. That's why full A2 size panels are so awesome for this technique. There's no guesswork in it. There's no lining it up. It's just you die cut it. It's all going to fit together perfectly. I layered 2 of those layers up and placed them down on top of the acetate piece. So now I have my card base, my acetate, then I've got 2 layers of white cardstock that I die cut. I put an acrylic block on top of that for some pressure, and now I'm going to mix up my gel medium. This is so important. You need a gloss gel medium. It is what is going to give you that really, really, really clear effect. You can use things like glossy accents, you can use things like Nuvo drops, but I like this because I can add whatever color of ink I want to it. I can add glitter to it. I could add little sand particles if I wanted to. There are so many things you can add to this. It's a great little tool to have on hand. I've done a ton of techniques with it, and I'll leave some videos linked down below if you've never seen something like this and what all you can do with it. It's pretty good stuff. So I applied 3 little dollops of that to just a little workable mat that I'm working on here. And I'm going to add some ink to these to color them. I'm using my Catherine Pooler inks, so I've got some Party Dress on top, Limoncello, and Aquatini is that pretty, pretty blue color that I'm mixing up now. You want to mix these up really, really well. You don't want any white streaks with it. So make sure you have a nice bold, or not a bold color, but a nice color all the way through. No streaking through this, because anywhere where you have streaking, it's going to be clear. You're not going to have any color. So mix those up all really well. I wanted these nice and pastel, so you can see I didn't mix all the ink with it. Just play around with your colors. Then take your palette knife and start filling in all those little openings with your butterfly. This is going to look awful. It just will. When you put it in, it's going to be messy. It's going to not be see-through. It's going to be nice and opaque, and it's not going to look anything like what it will look like finished. Just keep going and let it dry. It will work out in the end. One thing you want to remember whenever you're putting this on is you're going to have another layer on top of this. So make sure that whenever you fill up these holes, once you have it nice and filled up, take your palette knife and scrape off the excess. Make sure you do that so you have a nice flat surface to put your final layer on. Whenever you're filling these up, it is impossible to not get this on the outside cardstock. It just is not possible. That's why we're going to layer up another layer on top of this to cover up all that's going to get around the areas. So you want a nice flat surface to glue that onto, so just make sure you get all that excess off, no big globs or anything left on there. I'm going to fill up these butterflies, and while I'm filling these up, I want to tell you a little bit about the Save the Crafty YouTuber Hop. So the Save the Crafty YouTuber Hop was put together by Justine Hovey as a way to help smaller crafters get over the new YouTube monetization goals. We're coming together again, and I hope you find some new crafters that you love and enjoy watching so much. There's going to be so much fun inspiration on this hop, so be sure to hop along to all the different participants. The next stop on the hop is going to be directly below in my description box. The very first thing you see, it's going to be that link. But below that, you're going to want to go down and check out all the other information. Also, be sure to leave comments. The more comments you leave, the more chances you have of winning. Excuse my tablet that fell there. But anyway, there are going to be a ton of prizes handed out on different channels. My prize that I will be giving out personally is a $25 gift card to scrapbook.com. It's somewhere I shop often. It's somewhere that I stand behind that does a really good job of getting you your products quickly and intact. So I'm going to give a gift card away for that. And they are also a super sponsor. Check out all the super sponsors that are sponsoring this hop as well. There are a ton of great, great companies. So back to the projects. Once I had that completely filled up, I'm just going to clean up a little bit around the edges, and I need to set this aside to dry. The dry time is what takes the longest for this technique. I like to let mine go overnight. Once it is dry, look at that. I absolutely love this. It's so much fun. And when you close it up, it looks like a regular card. It's when you open it and hold it up, you can see the light through it, you can see everything, your fingers through it. It's so much fun. Now, you still have that little bit of a mess from putting down your color and all your gel medium through there. So we need to cover that up. That's where your last die cut comes in. You just want to add some liquid adhesive. Again, I like to use liquid for that little bit of playtime, plus it holds really well. I'll go ahead and put that over the top to cover up all my little mishaps there. And that is the card front. I added some cloud stenciling to the back of this with the die that I have on hand. Just a little bit of ink blending for something a little bit extra. I put something heavy on top of that, and then I finished this card off. I used a happy birthday sentiment from the stamp market, added a few jewels from Cat Scrappiness, and here are a few pictures. This last one is my favorite coming up. You can see the light through. Not the best picture background-wise, but it is so much fun to look at. All right, so we did a full card front, but a lot of us don't have huge background dies. I understand that, so I wanted to show you how to do this with just any regular die. So I've got some more examples. My next example, I'm going to be using this die. This is from the stamp market. I have admired this die for so long, and I finally just went ahead and bought it. I thought it would be perfect for this technique. So we're going to go ahead and start die cutting. Now, this is the trickiest part of this technique when you're using a smaller die, lining it up through all the panels and the card base. What I like to do is take it and line it up on two pieces of cardstock. So I've got two pieces that are A2 in size that I've lined up together. You can use a little bit of removable adhesive if you want to hold them in place. And I will place my die on top of those two pieces. It will not cut through both of them. You might get lucky, and it might every once in a while, but the majority of the time, it's not going to fully cut through both pieces. However, it will cut through the top one, so you get that first opening, and it will go through enough on your second layer to where you will have an indentation. You can pop that die back in like a puzzle piece, and you'll get it placed perfectly. So here you can see I removed that top layer. I did it carefully so I didn't rip this die. I do want to save the inside of this. I will inlay that back in a moment. But there I can pop that die right back in and run it through my die cutting machine. Again, I'm going to pop another piece under there, make sure they're nice and lined up. So I continue to go about doing each one of those die panels that way. Now when I get to the card base, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Line up my panel on top of my card base, run them both through my die cutting machine. It's not going to cut through both layers, but it will give me that indentation I need to go ahead and cut the rest of the way through on my second pass. I also like to lay a piece of computer paper over the top of that when I'm die cutting more than one layer. Sometimes it has a tendency to pick up any cut marks that are on your machine cutting pads. So just lay a piece of computer paper over to avoid that hassle. It's so annoying when you get through and you get those cut marks and then you can't even use it because it's got all those little, looks like webbing on your cardstock. Now it's time to build up these layers. So I have my card base. I'm going to put down my first layer on top of that, which is a piece of acetate to hold everything in so it doesn't run all over the place. Then I have my next two layers, which are two pieces of cardstock, my two panels, that I die cut. If you got a little off and these don't fit together, that's fine. All you need to do, it's just going to be slightly. Just take a craft knife and cut off those little pieces that are hanging over, no big deal. Now I also wanted to inlay these two pieces for a really cool stained glass look, so I'm going to go ahead and build up those pieces as well. If you have any dies that are outline dies, these look really cool with this technique, and it gives a really nice stained glass finish look, and I'll show you how I made it look like even more stained glass in just a moment. So I'm using liquid adhesive to layer these up. Again, just the easiest way to do this, so you've got that little bit of wiggle room, that little bit of playtime to make sure everything's nice and lined up before it decides you can't move it anymore. So I line those up. and I will inlay all of these pieces right into the opening. So I put my 2 layers of cardstock that I made into one panel over the acetate. Then I inlaid my little branch right into the opening. Any pieces of glue or any little squishies of glue that come out the side, I like to take my Quick Sticks tool and just use it to kind of scrape those up. It's not going to be a huge deal because you will be filling this in. However, just to clean up the edges, I like to use that. Again, I'm going to be using Catherine Pooler ink in Eucalyptus this time, which is a beautiful green color, and I'm using that same gloss gel medium. That's something you want to make sure if you are going to purchase this, make sure you get gloss gel medium, not matte gel medium. It's not going to work the same. Matte gives you a matte finish. You want the gloss finish for this technique. Now, once I had it mixed thoroughly, again, I'm just filling this in, making sure that I've got a nice smooth surface when everything is said and done. I set that aside to dry, and while that was drying, I'm going to go ahead and take my last little die cut, the inlay piece, the nice little branch piece, and I'm going to do some heat embossing on that. So we've all seen the technique where you can make the faux metal embellishments. That's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to layer up my embossing powder on top of each other on this die cut to create a metal look on this. So whenever you see stained glass, you always see the little, is it soldered? I don't know. The little metal pieces in between all the pieces of stained glass. That's the look I'm going for with this. I use liquid platinum embossing powder from Ranger. You could use gold, you could use silver, whatever you have on hand, just to give you that nice metal look. So once I had that done and I let that dry, it's time to finish this card off. So you can see this one's quite a mess around the edges, but it looks so, so cool on the inside. I absolutely love this. You've even got those little bitty air bubbles that you can see in stained glass, so it really is a true stained glass look. Now over the top of that, I'm going to go ahead and layer up my outside panel first, right on top of the card base. Again, if any of it is off, just use your craft knife or scissors to cut it and make sure it's all even. It's not a big deal if you're a little bitty bit off. Now once I had that on, it's time to inlay my faux metal piece now. This might warp a little bit from all the embossing powder on it. It might be a little bit bigger than what it was. Just work with it. It will go back into place. It just might take a little bit more working to get it in there. Again, I'm using liquid glue, and any that squished out the sides, I use my Quick Sticks tool to get that off before it dried on there. And there is a look at that one. This one is so cool. I didn't want to do much more, so I cut a flag banner, used a Stamp Market stamp set that had a thinking of you sentiment in it, used the same embossing powder, popped that up, and that card was done. This one is probably the most simple. It is the most simple, but it is my favorite by far. Here's a closer look at it so you can see the light through it. It's such a fun technique. So we're going to move on to the next example, and for this one I'm going to do some stamping underneath the stained glass. So it actually looks like the stamping's on the outside of the card until you open it and you see it on the inside. I'll be using the Altenew Lavender Bud mini stamp set and die set for this one. So I did my die cutting exactly like I did before. I cut 3 cardstock panels and my card base, which is an A2 top folding card base. And now I'm going to stamp in my card base before I do anything more. So before I put the acetate in, before I do anything, I find it easiest to go ahead and stamp through those openings. So I used a little bit of removable adhesive, close the card, put it in my mini MISTI, and I'll go ahead and do my stamping through that opening so everything lines up perfectly. I'm using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, not Nocturne, VersaFine Clair inks. I use Nocturne all the time, can you tell? But I used Rainforest on the bottom, and then on the top I did some Purple Delight, and then just on the edges I'm going to hit the edge of that Lavender Bud with a little bit of Monarch, which is a darker purple. That's going to give me just the tiniest bit of shading. It's not very noticeable, but I do love the look of it. So I took that extra step and went ahead and added that layer. Now I can go ahead and open this up, and I've got my stamping perfectly lined up on the inside of the card, but it lines up perfectly with that opening. For this card, I am going to make my gloss gel just clear. However, I'm adding a little bit of glitter to it. This I got from the craft section at Michael's. It's a nice fine glitter. You can use any glitter you have on hand. I just wanted a nice clear glitter. And I'm not adding much here, just a few little sprinkles, and then I'll go ahead and mix it up. Again, mix it well. You want to make sure you have no big clumps of glitter, and you want to make sure that it's going to stay intact in that gel medium. Once I had that, I'm going to go ahead and start putting it through my opening. So I layered this one up just like I did the others. I put my acetate on the card base. Then I added my 2 layers that I had stacked up one on top of the other and placed them over the acetate to create that little bit of a well that I needed to put my gel medium into. I'm going to make sure it's nice and smoothed out, and then I will go ahead and clean up the edges. You don't want to leave any of that around the edges because you have that extra layer to add on top. Even with this one, it's still going to look messy when it's all said and done. Even though it's clear, it will have that shiny effect. So I went ahead and let that dry, and then look at this. I finished this one off screen, but I've got this gorgeous clear see-through that looks like the stamp's underneath it all, and it is, but it's on the inside of the card. So you have that extra little bit when you open up the card, which is so fun. Plus you have that glitter in the gel medium, which gives a really, really fun look to the stamped image. I added some stenciling around this, used an Altenew fine frames around the flower, added some more jewels from Cat Scrappiness, and stamped a little sentiment right there on the bottom. And that was that card. Super, super simple. So finally, I want to show you how to do this technique if you don't want a full A2 sized panel or a full card front look. Maybe you want to do this through some die cuts. So I used Cat Scrappiness's zigzag rectangle die set. I die cut that 3 times with one of the rectangle dies. Then I'll go ahead and overlay those dies that now have my little rainbow die cut into them. I did that just the same way. Line them up, put them through my die cutting machine just like I did beforehand. But on my card base, I need to go ahead and line up one of the die cuts how I want it to look on the finished card. Then I can go ahead and hold that in place and inlay my die right back into that opening. That is going to make sure that my rainbow is cut into the exact spot I need it to be on my card base. Again, I like to put that piece of computer paper over the top just so I don't get all those little marks from my cutting plate. I wanted to inlay my die on the inside of the card, so I wanted this to be visible underneath. So it doesn't have to be a stamp that shows through if you want something to show through. It can be your dies. So I used that Paper Smooches rainbow die, and I saved one of the little die cuts from it, and I inked those up with my Distress inks. Then I'll go ahead and do the same thing that I did with the stamps. Use my removable adhesive. You don't even have to take that step. It just makes it easier for me. And I put the card together so I had a nice opening to work through. Then I'll take that little rainbow die pieces, put some liquid adhesive on the back of them, and put them right back into that opening on the inside of the card. So it's going to still show through to the front of the card, but when you open it up, you still have that rainbow on the inside, which is so, so much fun. So I'm going to continue to layer those up until I have each one of my little rainbow pieces. Then I can open up my card and add in all of my layers on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and take my acetate first, and I put that down. Then I layered up 2 of my rectangle die cuts, and I will layer those right on top of that opening. Again, using liquid adhesive, so I got that little bit of playtime. I'll layer that up over the opening, and then I've got this nice stacked die cut panel on top with my opening in it. So it just adds that extra layer of interest. Again, with this one, I want that rainbow to be visible. So I'm using clear, no additives to this except a little bit of glitter. This is a nice clear glitter again that I'm using, and not much of this one at all, just a tiny, tiny bit. And I'll mix that in, make sure it's nice and mixed in so I don't have any big clumps or anything. I put that through my opening. Again, it's going to look messy. That's okay. Just make sure it's nice and smooth. You also want to make sure you don't have any like little cat hairs if you have cats, or pet hairs, or little lint pieces in there, because that will show up when everything's set and dry. But I set that aside to dry, and then I added over my top layer. Again, I did some cloud stenciling over it, added a little happy birthday sentiment, a few clouds. This one is so, so much fun. I especially love that it looks like the rainbow is laid underneath the stained glass, but it's still visible when you open up the card. So it's a lot of fun, and it just dresses up the inside of the card as well. It's still nice and see-through, even with that glitter. You just have that added extra shine, and there's a closer look at that rainbow on the inside. One final look through the little light coming through. I love those shots. Those are so much fun. And finally, I wanted to show you what these look like when they're standing up on display. It's still gorgeous, still a lot of fun to look at. That does it for me today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Don't forget to leave a comment down below for your chance to win. Also, the next stop on the hop is going to be directly below in the description box. Thanks for watching, and happy crafting, everyone.